Hello. My name is Olivia. Welcome to my channel, the omb.frequency. And yes, I'm going to be doing a reading. And I'm going to be doing a reading. One thing I'm trying to cultivate, one thing that let me charge my phone. One thing that I am really trying to do when it comes to this channel is go through, and just in terms of like what I try to do period, is pay attention to processes, the process as a journey. And so I'm not one to like, I am the type of person to like start a YouTube channel and then talk about how the process of starting a YouTube channel is part of the whole process. And yeah, so I guess that's going to come with a lot of like vulnerability and honesty about the process of doing this, because it is a process. And this reading, I already pulled the cards, is going to sort of be about that process, because I consider myself an uncontrollable, I've named myself an uncontrollable creator. And that creation is not only, creation of works, being a writer, being a poet, so yeah, creator of like art and poetry, and being a screenwriter and all of that type of creativity. Dabbling in like drawing and painting and stuff like that. But it's also tied to being a creator in terms of being a collaborator in the creation of, and the co-creation of reality. And that there's and that there is a creative sort of spirit, a creative collective subconscious, unconscious, that we sort of pull from and transmute into creation, whether it be a frequency of thoughts and ideas that we kind of like grab and transmute into words, or into a poem, or into writing, or into a patent, or there's this grabbing and transmuting and create, and that is like sort of the process of creation. There's the creation of like relationships, and so it extends beyond just like creating works of art, but also like being a creator of, it's like walking into a room and not really feeling the vibes, and then understanding that as a co-creator of the space, you can do one thing, say one thing, act a certain way, change your own energy to change the whole space, and become an influential creator in the space. So yeah, an uncontrollable creator and a creative doula, because I see myself as, not only do I want to be an actual like birth doula, but I also see myself as someone who has a sort of like natural ability to empower people in their creation. A lot of times we get stuck in not thinking we are creators, or not seeing ourselves as creators. And I feel like I've always had even through like tarot reading, been able to shift people's under the narratives and like perspectives on their ability to create and to shift a narrative or change a storyline, or even just being around certain people and they feel, or they at least tell me that being around me makes them want to like do something, or like it moves energy in a certain way. And so, and also a creative doula, because I'm not trying to be a martyr. And so I'm not like creating for people. I'm just like a doula is not having the baby for you. It's just kind of like supporting and guiding and providing space in the creative process. So that's sort of yeah, how I see myself, and that is all about process, the process of creation, being an ongoing process. Also on my channel, I talk about ancestral process theology, or Black indigenous ancestral process theology, and that's based in the idea that the creation story is an ongoing creation story that is happening right now in this moment. And so even I like the theology that I sort of like identify with right now, because that'll change. It seems like it changes a lot, or I'm open to the change, I guess. Is based on the idea that, you know, the creation story is happening because, as I said, we're like co-collaborators in creation. And so and in the process of being co-creators of reality, we are also, you know, that going towards being a creative doula and a creator, and also thinking about just being a doula and the idea of birth and ancestors, being an ancestor, and thinking about how all of this creation happened to create me today, and then all of what I do will be a part of that ongoing creation that I am collaborating with, and will influence a sort of creation moving forward. Of course, taking into consideration that time isn't linear, and so all of this is sort of happening in an eternal now, which so many traditions speak about the idea of an eternal now, and time not being linear, and, you know, the crown chakra being a space of the eternal now. So yeah, the idea of processes, process theology, of creative process, and you know, in these processes, there's never a sort of never-ending eternal nowness to it. So, you know, the yeah, I talk about it in my process theology video, but, you know, the creation story and creation is a constant, eternal now happening, and so I really just want to talk about processes. I feel like that's would be like beneficial. And so in talking about that was a long way to get to what I actually wanted to say, was that a part of what I want to do is just do like daily videos, daily sort of like check-ins, daily sort of like ramblings, daily just giving myself the ability of going through the process of getting comfortable in front of camera, of getting comfortable. I keep getting nudges that I'm, you know, I thought, what was it, probably January, when I was like, oh, I'll start a YouTube channel. And I prepared myself first going like live on Instagram last year, but I've been preparing myself to do this for probably 2 years. Just like preparing myself to actually like be in camera and speak. And it's been a long process of transmuting many things to be able to do this. And I thought once I like do it, it would be easy, but it's the consistency in it that is not necessarily something that I am worried about, but because I like an audience, because I like engagement, because I like to feel like when I do this that I'm being engaged with, you need followers to do that, like subscribers, and the only way to really get those subscribers is to be consistent and collaborate with the algorithm. So that's been a dilemma, because I like to do what I want, and I don't want to be on here every day. Especially doing the same thing. So I want to do readings occasionally. I don't like the idea of doing like daily readings in the sense, it doesn't matter. I just want to do like daily check-ins, daily videos, in some way. So it might just be called Daily Ramblings, and if you fuck with it, then join me. And so I picked some cards just to the cards kind of just keep me on track for us, they like help with the story. And this is a story of sort of what I've been talking about, preparing for being of service. Because at first it was, I just need to go live because that's what I need to like go live and get on YouTube because that's what I'm feeling. But then it became, especially now that I'm just finished The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell, and that it's becoming less about needing to just like create content, but more about like being sort of stuck in a place where I'm like, yes, like you go through like going through intense experiences and moments and deep reflection on things, and then wondering why, and then getting to a point where it's like, this wasn't just for my experience, this was like to being of service in some way. And that goes towards the first card, which was Empowered Service. And the card basically just talks about that. There's a certain level where your experiences and what you're going through is not just for yourself. There's a certain point in the hero's journey. Once you go through a sort of hero's journey, you're taken into this kind of ritualistic space that you cross a threshold, go into this ritualistic space. You go into this space where you're in the wilderness, or however you want to think about it, where your perceptions are shifted and you're in this kind of like upside down space. You're in the unknown, and you have to go through an experience that transforms you. When you leave that space, it's not just for your own personal, the hero's journey really begins when they leave that space, because it's no longer just for them. It's like the Empowered Service card, and what I'm talking about is like being initiated into, you know, after going through a hero's journey, you're sort of like initiated into now go teach. You know, like Jesus spent years like in the wilderness, and what was it, up until like 30? He's just kind of doing his own thing. We don't really hear about him. He's going through this like personal journey, and then boom, it's time to like be of service and to speak and to share. And so it's sort of like yeah, like an unfolding of purpose. This card speaks about something like a divine graduation. And it's the moment, and it talks a lot about how the moments when you're really like going through this like graduation, or you know, for example, like me making this, because I said I like an audience. I like to have a sort of feedback. But in starting this channel, it would be very realistic for me to think that maybe only like 10 people are gonna see this video within the next week, maybe. You know, because it is an early channel. And so it's like right now the point of me like sort of being here is not necessarily to be seen, but the point is these sort of like, it says some of the most difficult and most spiritually empowering lessons you will master on earth plane are those of endurance and continued effort in the absence of immediately perceivable results. So yeah, this like not very glamorous or very like being in the darkness, being in that hero's journey, where, because the hero's journey, if you think about stuff like The Wiz or The Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland, these journeys of crossing a threshold into these like spaces where perception is shifted, or like there's this sort of like it's an inner journey. It's not necessarily something to be seen by other people. Most of the time they're taken to a space, and then when they come back, people are like, where the fuck were you, and why are you so different, and what did you go through? It's not, the people around them are not necessarily going to see them in that journey. And yeah, I feel like I've been doing a lot of that. And so, and I guess the process of like this channel is sort of part of that as well. Especially right now, is like nobody's watching this, you know? And so it's me like working on my consistency. Like, can I show up and be consistent even when nobody's watching? And I have a Leo Mars in tropical astrology, so it's a little difficult, and an Aries sun and rising. So I'm just like, I would prefer not to speak to the void of 10 people, but it's okay. And then, yeah, there's another aspect that like being in this, let me go through these cards, but there's this sort of like trust that's needed, and there's a one of the beautiful things about where I am right now and where this part of the process is that it's a space where you can be like extra creative because nobody's watching you. So one day I could put out this video and say like, oh, I'm gonna do this every day, and then the next day I can be like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this every day, but maybe I'll try doing this every day. And there's a real space of like cultivation that can happen, and cultivating a unique way of doing things, or a unique, it's a very like sacral, not sacral, solar plexus journey, solar plexus to heart chakra journey of like carving an individual path to be in service of others. And so, and being service to be like the best service to other people a lot of times is just like being yourself, which the next card I got is the ancestors, the what's it called, Grandma Baby's Black Gold Lenormand deck, and it's the sun. I don't know if you can see that, but it's illumination. The sun lights our way forward, drawing us closer to completion. It illuminates work that needs extra attention if we are to succeed, and highlights solutions we might have overlooked. If you've been lacking direction and drive, you will soon feel a surge of energy and inspiration. The sun is charity and warmth. Keep up the hard work. Keep planting seeds. The sun will help you nourish them to full bloom. And the hardest part about this is that there is a sort of like being in the darkness. And the thing about being in the darkness and what like the like leading up to this moment was a lot of like not even understanding understanding, yeah, but like not necessarily sitting in the details of understanding why it was so difficult, why it's so difficult to like be seen and do this and speak. But yeah, it's like being in the darkness and knowing that, you know, the emotions will always be there. Emotions will always be there. They'll always be there. They'll always cycle through. They'll always come back. But there's a need to sometimes put in action to the action before the emotions. So it's not necessarily having emotions and then doing actions based off of those emotions, but having emotions and doing actions to transmute the emotions. And so here I am. And in doing that and taking that call to action, that's when you start to see a little bit of light, a little bit of sunlight in the darkness, and facing the darkness and deciding to participate in the darkness. That's when the sun, you know, I think it's interesting that the sun cards, like even in the tarot, the sun has a baby on it, because it's like that thing that's happening on Twitter where people would be like for example, for me, it would be like a TikTok of like, oh, I only have 7 subscribers, and then a picture of me as a baby, like, wait, we have a YouTube channel? You know, it's like, when you like sit in the darkness and take the call to action to participate in the darkness, and you start to see that little ray of sunshine, it usually is some part of you, some like inner child part of you, some like looking at the baby aspect of you that you're in some ways doing it for. Like you want to make that person proud, or you want to be that person that that little person might have needed, or you want to, in some ways, like the sitting in the darkness is usually sitting in trauma and like pain from the past. Like if you have like having pain of like not wanting to be seen or not wanting to use my voice or speak, and then, you know, maybe like little Olivia thought this is just how it is, and now, you know, I can be upset about like not having the audience or whatever, but, you know, little me is just surprised that I even had the, you know, the courage to do something. So it's that the process is usually like, I appreciate, or I notice a lot of the sun cards have like babies on them, and there's just something about looking at the baby aspect of yourself and the young aspect of yourself where it just makes you want to show up for them and makes you want to accept, you like really accept all of who you are. In a sense, when you look at like younger aspects of yourself, it's like that person was probably not, you know, at a similar evolution of where I am now, but it's like a sort of love that you have for them that illuminates solutions. And usually that solutions is a sort of like, the solution is a sort of like graciousness and compassion for yourself, which allows for you to take the baby step process. Okay, so the next cards I got was letter. There's a letter, the coffin, and the girl, the woman. The letter, the coffin, and the woman. And so I don't know, this could be in going like side message. You know, this could obviously be information about someone dying, but when I see this, I think, so this letter is like, this letter is being carried by a dove, which is a symbol of like purity, a symbol of, yeah, a very pure space. And the letter is being like, the letter usually is like a card of receiving information, receiving news. The sun also spoke about like sort of receiving solutions. The coffin is making me think of, because it's not like an overground coffin, like it's not, it doesn't make me think of like coffins like how we do it, where we take polished wood and like put it underground, but it looks to me like sort of re-entering earth, being buried. Whenever you have aspects of death, you also have aspects of rebirth. And so it makes me think of going from this, you know, the purity of the call to action, you know, the bird sending, the dove bringing the call to action, the coffin being this sort of like being buried into darkness, and the woman kind of like being yeah, it's like a rebirth. You know, it could be, I'm speaking mostly to women or femmes here. It could be, you know, being buried into the sort of like mother. A lot of this is a lot of what we perceive to be like as feminine or like woman things, like service. But I also think of it, not really, because service is a lot of times we like to say women should be of service, but it's really not that way. It's more of like a man thing to be of service. But in continuing this mythology perspective, the woman could be the mother, the life force, or like I was saying in the beginning, the aspect of creation where the mother and the child and death, these like processes of life, and just being of service to that. So the story is kind of what I've been saying, of this receiving information about an ending or to a new beginning, to like a death of parts of yourself that put you in service to the totality, to just the whole process from the whole process. So as the coffin is sort of like being buried into earth and allowing for earth to kind of take over, allowing nature to take over, getting into this sort of like instinctive, and you know, when we think about rites of passages for like women and femmes and people with uteruses, it's this rite of passage is allowing nature to take over. Like nature takes over your body. You don't really have a choice. All of a sudden you are a vessel for life. You're a vessel to nourish life, and you are bleeding. You are in communication with the moon in some way, maybe. And yeah, you are transformed and become like sort of buried into nature. And to be of service kind of puts you in that space, because you're not necessarily thinking about yourself. It's like, it's weird, because it's like thinking about, you know, going into the darkness and the wilderness is deeply thinking about yourself and going through this place to like sort of break down your ego, and then being like taken so the solar plexus is sort of like the call to action to like a sort of personal journey. And so you have that personal journey, and it's done by yourself. It's done in the inner journey. It's done in the aspect of like death. You die alone. Your ego is like broken down, and you face it. And the ego with the sun, you face like this aspect of like of self, and then you come out of it. And that ego then becomes a sort of creative expression. A lot of like creatives, and when you need to be a creative, and we need to be creative, and when you need to create something, you need your ego to create. You need your ego to construct something personal to yourself, this unique path, this unique, you know, there's the collective like creative spirit, but then in order to take from it and produce something that comes from you and is from you, you need your ego to sort of like create that. And in doing that and in sharing that, it's like in using your ego needs to be of service. And doing that and sharing that, your ego now becomes of service to the whole. So the 5 of Blades is reversed. And it's just like, the 5 of Blades is like conflict and like going into, it's like a, you know, going into battle, conflict, like being a, like sort of a warrior. It makes me think of the sort of initiation and rites of passage. It makes me think of the initiation and rites of passage that you see in a lot of, like, you hear about in a lot of like older traditions or ancient or indigenous, where the rites of passage for men and males who don't have uteruses and don't get taken over by nature, they have to in some way be like, nature has to be constructed and imposed onto them. They have to go through a big conflict and a big, so it's just making me think of like rites of passage. And I think it's reversed because when the blades is like mental energy, so reversed, it's giving me like the mental turmoil of being in the darkness, the mental turmoil of like being in the wilderness, of being called to the journey. It's like a journey that is happening in some ways, has to happen, but it's like the longer it goes on, the more difficult it is more of a mental struggle than, because it would be nothing if like I wanted to make a YouTube channel and 2 years ago I had just turned on the camera and started talking about whatever and not caring about anything about being perceived. And so this 5 of Blades reversed is sort of like the mental battle, like 2 years of like of worrying about like, what am I going to talk about and do people want to hear it, and this whole like mental conflict that is part of the process. So, you know, the 5 of Blades is part of the process. Part of the process is to go from the 1 to the 10, and you have to get through the 5 of Blades, and sometimes it might be reversed where you're just overthinking and you're this internal mental battle, but it's part of the process. But it doesn't have to be a part of the process that you sit in for so long, because you could just follow that nature. The next card is Judgment, and this is important, especially with what the card looks like. You can really see it. It's a woman with a butterfly on her heart chakra. It's a green butterfly on her heart chakra, and she's like big in front of it's an audience of people below her. So she's like heart wide open, naked, in front of this audience of people, which, if that's not what YouTube feels like, then or this whole like what journey that I'm talking about is that judgment of like I was saying, there's the solar plexus of the journey to like break down the ego, and then there's the heart chakra, which is the opening up to the audience, opening up to the people, opening up to the vision, opening up to the masses. And you know that the 5 of Blades rite of passage is sort of like, in some ways, being your hardest critic. It's like getting to that moment, because the rite of passage is for men and males, and the man, the masculine aspect is just your sort of sense of individuality and path and destiny. And so this sort of like Five of Blades initiation, the male initiation, the masculine initiation, the rite of passage, this mental conflict is an initiation of like enforcing nature on yourself to go through difficulties so that you can stand the judgment, is sort of like becoming your worst critic, being your worst enemy, being the devil to your story. One thing that was interesting is I was reading that I never really heard before, but I'm reading The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell, and they're talking about one story about the idea of Jesus or God and the devil is that God created humans and wanted angels to be in service to humans, and Satan said, no, I can't be in service to humans because I love you, I'm in service to you. And so God said, you know, like, get out of my face, you won't listen to me. And so it's like this love story between the devil and God. And so I don't, if that resonates, maybe it'll resonate as I keep talking, but I felt the need to talk about it. So it's like this, you become this like worst enemy to yourself, where it's like you're anticipating all of the bad things that people might say, or all of the, you know, you're like putting up all these roadblocks for yourself to prepare for what might come, and to feel like you can like, you know, stand the audience and stand the crowd and stand the judgment. And so you play that part first so that you can go out and be of service. And so it was talking about, the story was saying like, Joseph was saying like, in some way saying go to hell is like a love saying or something, like saying go to hell. It's like this, the idea of like love being suffering, like, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. In order to like go into that wilderness, and to like, if something makes you go into the wilderness, and something makes you go into like the depths of your soul so that you do it, then you must really love it. That is love. That is like, you're willing to deconstruct yourself and be cast into hell in order to prove the service and love that you have to this destiny. And the last card is the Two of Staves, which is a card of vision. One, masquerades and masks are used to sort of put on a mask of divinity, the mask of like God, or to put on this image of divinity, and then standing on stilts to get a higher perspective. So it's like a lot of masquerades in like different cultures is wanting to be like in the image of God, and so you get on these stilts to get a higher perspective. And that's sort of, I wrote a poem about this, that's sort of like the process as you go. It's like going into the wilderness and going into darkness is standing on the stilts and going into divinity, and going into this higher perspective. Think of like Alice in Wonderland. She was high on drugs, like perception is distorted. So you go into this deep, dark space to get to higher ground and see have a visionary look, being able to have this visionary look, and then it's like coming out of that threshold is like stepping down from the stilts and now saying, okay, I just went up here and saw way out there, so now that I'm down from these stilts, how do I integrate that into my human space? So yeah, that's what I have. That's what I got. Hope it was something for you. Well, like I said, I'm just here for the process. But yeah, if you made it this far, I never say this in the beginning, but if you made it this far, then thanks, and book a reading with me. To book a reading with me, it's in the description box. On my Instagram, you'll find all the information for my rates and like contacting me and booking me what type of readings I do. I do a clarity reading, which is like a cute, short, simple reading for clarity. I do a shadow work. Alchemy, which is sort of like emotional. Shiloh, stop. Shiloh. Emotional alchemy, which is like that transmutation. So like if you are in the process of trying to make something happen and you're sort of in that wilderness space and needs some movement with the alchemy of the emotional, a different perspective, that alchemy is for that. The shadow work is just kind of really going deeper into that and really looking at like the story and the emotional alchemy and some advice and like how to really shift the mindset for creation. And then I have an archetypal journey, which will go through the who, where, the tool, and the purpose for a sort of like archetypal journey that you're on. So, and then also if there's something specific that you might want, we can get creative with it. Just hit me up. Thanks for joining.